Anyway, so Darius had been on a conquering spree, and he'd conquered Asia Minor and even Thrace, which Thrace is northeast of Greece. We see that right up here. And this is Asia Minor. It's the present-day country of Turkey, a lot of that. Sometimes it's called Anatolia. And right there, along the west coast of Asia Minor, we have the Ionian Greeks living there. So they're Greeks already under Persian rule. Now, this happens 519. So a few years before the wars are going to start. Now, the way this starts, the Greeks living in Ionia, they say, help us, help us. We don't want to be ruled by the Persians. Athens, you guys have a democracy. It's so cool. And Athens, who had just invented the democracy in 509, is like, oh, you think we're cool? And they wanted to go and spread this idea of citizens going and having political power. Because remember, democracy is power to the people, And so when the Ionian Greeks say, hey, the Persians, they don't let us have a democracy. We have to go listen to a king. And the king just raised our taxes. Now, odds are probably a lot of the reason why the Ionians were complaining, because we know the Persians are pretty kind rulers, is they didn't want to pay the extra taxes. That's probably the main cause for the Ionians. But they tell the Athenians that this democracy thing sounds really, really cool. So Athens, feeling good about themselves, saying, yeah, let's go spread democracy. Let's go give these Ionian Greeks freedom. They send some soldiers and a navy over to the Ionian Greeks. And they go and they get the Greeks, because they're coming from a city-state called Miletus, and they go to Miletus. They kick out the Persian soldiers in Miletus. They kick out the governor, and the soldiers, they're retreating. They're running away. The governor's getting out of there. He hops on his horse, is riding away. And they feel so good about kicking out the Persians out of the city-state of Miletus that they keep on marching down the royal road and go to the capital of that region, a city-state called, well, it's not a city-state, I apologize, because it's part of the Persian Empire, a city called Sardis. And they burn Sardis to the ground. And when they burn Sardis to the ground, not only do they go and, destroy where the Persian government was for that area, they also burn down the Zoroastrian temple. Now, it's hard for us to kind of get the same kind of feelings that ancient people would. But for the Persians, with their faith, it was central to them. The king ruled because of Ahura Mazda, with the whole, remember, we talked about Zoroastrianism, and we have Ahura Mazda, which is their one god, and it's this whole battle between good and evil. And the king is supposed to be doing the good of Ahura Mazda. So the king believes his authority comes from their religion. And we go and we see that the people, they thought all of their successes, all of their goodness came from their religion. And so when the Greeks burned down the Zoroastrian temple, that was like Lexi walking over to Alex, slapping him in the face and saying, you're garbage. Don't do that, Lexi. It's not nice. But that's how the Persians felt. Oh, she's waving her hand. I'm getting nervous. She's going to slap me. So the Persians get mad. They get really mad. Now, the Athenians were able to help the people of Miletus because there wasn't that many Persian soldiers there. Remember, Persia is the biggest empire in the world at this moment. And if they wanted to, they could have crushed that revolt, but they didn't have all the soldiers there. So when word gets back to Darius that the Greeks, of all people, had rebelled, so the Ionian Greeks rebelled, and then Athenians from the mainland of Greece came and helped them, and they burned down a temple, he took it personally. So he masses this huge Persian army. And at the same time, so the Persian army is coming. The Athenians are like, oh, well, we're glad we helped you, and we'll see you later. So they abandon the Ionian Greeks. The Athenians, they get out of there because they know what's about to happen. And the Persian army comes They destroy the rebelling Ionian Greeks. They destroy the city-state of the city of Miletus. I keep on saying city-state because it was a Greek city-state and then it's part of the Persians. I'm really sorry. And then they sell some of the population even to slavery. So we have this situation where there is this Ionian revolt, this cry for freedom, and then it is crushed utterly and completely. But now, we know that this isn't the end of the story. We know that Darius took this personally and he vowed for his revenge. Now, before we get into that though, let's talk about why did the Athenians butt in? First off, the Ionians are Greek. Remember, we had our Dorian invasion, which so many of you did so well on that question on the Quizzy Poo, so good job. The Dorian invasion had come in, and Greeks left Greece, and they went all over, including Asia Minor. So the Ionians are Greeks. The people who live on the mainland of Greece are Greeks. They are all Greeks together. And although it's not a unified country, they share the same culture, they share the same language, and so there's a kinship between them. Secondly, remember, Persia is gigantic. It is big. It is scary. It is ever growing. It's the largest empire in the world at that time. And you know that they're going to want to expand. Now, if you are mainland Greece, you don't want to be right up against the Persian Empire. Because guess who's next? It's you. So the mainland Greeks, they want a little area that's outside of Greece that isn't controlled by the Persians. And guess what? That's the Ionians. So part of the reason why they do this, it looks real friendly, like, oh yeah, we want to help you out, but it's also, they want something so when the Persians decide to attack, guess who they're going to attack? The Ionians, not the regular Greeks. Does that make sense? They want a buffer. They want a pad in between. They want a shield. And they're using their Ionian brethren as that shield. But also, the Athenians, they wanted to trade. They needed trade, especially because they're growing olives, which is great for making moolah. It's great for making, the olive oil, which they used as their primary trade thing. And they have olive oil for cooking, for using for lanterns. Like I said, they even used it for bathing. I mean, it was a really popular thing. And they grew grapes, which is great for, snacking on or making wine. But guess what? Khan isn't going to live off of olive oil, olives and grapes alone. He wants other food. And so the Athenians would trade those things to get grain. And most of that grain came from Asia Minor. So they wanted to have better trade. But then, of course, the final reason, it would be glorious for them to go into battle, save the day, spread democracy. So there's a little bit of that aspect. They wanted to look good and feel good, being heroes. Now, like I was saying, Darius is going to vow revenge. Because, he is mad. He is so mad. They burned the temple. They burned his city. They insulted him. So every time before Darius would have a meal, he'd have one of his servants whisper into his ear, "Remember the Athenians." So, Darius, he's at the drive-thru at McDonald's. He's about to bite into his Big Mac, and his servant, Alexander, goes, "Remember the Athenians." He's at the movie theater. He's about to bite into his popcorn, and Khan goes, "Remember the Athenians." He's at a fancy sushi restaurant, and then Shania goes right before he pops that sushi in his mouth, "Remember the Athenians." So he wants to always remember, and he wants to get this revenge. So why? First off, he has to punish the people who go against him. If you're a king and people rebel against you, if people rebel against you and you just let them rebel, then who's going to respect you as a king? So, for example, if I'm your teacher, which I am, surprise, surprise, and Khan is just acting crazy in class and I don't stop him from acting crazy, I'm essentially saying it's okay for anyone to act. Cut it out, Alex. So I'm essentially saying it's okay for anybody to act crazy. And then our classroom will be chaos and no one will learn. It would be a complete disaster. So he has to punish those rebels. Secondly, why get revenge? It's an excuse to conquer Greece, which he's been wanting to conquer Greece because guess what? Where else can they go? They've already got over here. They want to go there. They want to have it all. And if they conquer Greece, they get more taxes, which guess what? Kings always love having more taxes. You get more crowns, more palaces, stuff like that. And they can control the Athenian trade. Remember, Athens was super duper rich because they're trading the olives, because they're trading the grapes. They're able to go have the olive oil and wine, their big cash crops, what they're making tons and tons and tons of money on. Darius wants a piece of that action. All right. And finally, obviously, glory. Everyone will think Darius is so amazing if he conquers yet another place. Because remember, he is going off of he's behind, Cambyses, who barely ruled, because we had that whole story where, the fake bard died and then Cambyses randomly dying, probably to Darius, but maybe because of an infection. So his real only predecessor before him, though, was Cyrus the Great. And Darius doesn't want to be known as Darius the Second or Darius the Okay. He wants to be the Great, just like the first ruler of Persia, Cyrus. All right, we're going to do one more slide, guys. And you don't have to write anything here. So, and this is just a quote that we have going on for here, what Herodotus is going to say. Herodotus says, "The power of Athens had been great before, but now that the tyrants were gone, it became greater than ever." So Herodotus writes this about Athens. And so we have this situation where the city-state of Athens is becoming very powerful. When they throw off the shackles of tyrants and create a democracy, Athens is thriving. At the same time, over to their east, they have the Persian Empire, which is thriving. So we're going to have a clash of two titans. And we're going to get to that tomorrow with our Battle of Marathon. So thank you all very much for listening for that. Let's see here. This is still so complicated compared to my old setup, which I guess is technically more complicated, but stopping the recording. Do we have questions